Hi, I'm Dr. Jane Goldberg. I'm here to do my show Inspirations, and my guest today is Ted Rockwell. Ted is actually a nuclear physicist.
Nuclear engineer.
Nuclear engineer in the past, but we're not here to talk about nuclear energy today. We're going to talk about something more subtle and more mysterious and maybe even more interesting. We're here to talk about parapsychology because both of us have a history of parapsychology in common, which I discovered recently. And you knew my mentor because actually my graduate degree was in experimental cognition, and I was specializing in doing research in parapsychology, which of course is the study of psychic phenomena. So it turns out you know a lot of the people that I used to know way back when, and that you were part of that whole movement. So I'm really interested in talking to you and finding out everything that you did then and what you know and what's happening today with parapsychology.
Well, I'm not current as to what's happening today. I hear a few things off and on. And I did essentially no research myself in the laboratory. I published a number of papers and wrote some books and stuff, but the key thing is that what I was trying to find out was what I was interested in was the interaction between the parapsychologists and the mainstream scientists. And I was for about 12 years the official designated contact between, the way I characterized it in those days, between the kooks and the squares. I was the contact for the American Association for Advancement of Science. And it turned out that the kooks pretty much, at least that behaved as such, were the mainstream people. They call themselves skeptics. And skeptic, of course, means that you're the one that asks questions that other people take for granted. But it seemed to work out the other way. The people that were interested in trying to find out what's going on were the parapsychologists. They were asking the questions and trying to set up to find answers. And the mainstream people said that this continued because these people were strange kind of people who had a strong need to believe. But it was very clear that the people who were trying to defend it, need to believe and not look and not question, were the mainstream scientists. So we had a lot of fun going back and forth on that kind of thing. And the reason I happened to get into it fairly deeply, fairly fast, was that I got into it because my wife bought a copy of a book by two very smart women who spent a good bit of time in Eastern Europe studying what they labeled their book as is Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain. And this did indeed have, despite the spectacular sounding name, was really a very solid scientific book with lots and lots and lots of references by legitimate journals. And my wife read it, thought it was interesting, got me to read it, and she said, gee, we ought to get into this, more. How can we? And I said, well, there's going to be a meeting of the Parapsychological Association in a month or so down in Miami. Why don't we go? And she said, would you do that? And I said, sure, let's go. So we went down and met J.V. Ryan, and J.V. Ryan seemed very, very interested in talking with me, and it turned out that
J.V. Ryan was at Duke.
J.V. Ryan was at Duke.
Had a parapsychology research department.
Yeah, he was the guy that really first, in America anyway, tried to bring the ghosts into the laboratory, as he described it. And what he did was to come up with new terminology. He coined the term extrasensory perception, which is has no spiritualistic. He was trying to separate religious and spiritualistic things. He says, I'm trying to do experiments, and I don't ask or care what's involved. We're trying to discover what's happening. And so he invented that term, and telepathy and precognition and those terms, and started the work. And in those days, the field of psychology itself, as a science, measuring things and so forth, was brand new and was using the new math to try to put numbers on things that people before were sort of philosophizing about. So they were struggling for their own identity, and this was a branch of science, so that there was a lot of initial groping around on that. It turned out the reason that Ryan was interested in talking to me was because I was an outsider in the field, and he was getting to the point where he said he felt he ought to get out of the field. He felt he had dominated it too much and held back the younger people. And he had brought in a guy from India that he wanted to chair the organization and for himself to step back, maybe write some books and so forth, but get away from the main thing. And he wanted somebody from the outside to evaluate how this was going. And he said, would you like to attend the board meeting of the Parapsychological Association and just tell me what you think of this new guy? And you know, so I was a little surprised by this, but I said, sure. And I did, and I came back, and he said, well, what did you find? He says, what do you think of this guy? And I said, well, there was a guy who dominated the meeting who wasn't this guy. And he said, gee, who was that? And I said, you. I said, they continually were talking about what you would want or what you wouldn't want. And he said, and I said, this is something I'm very familiar with because I've gone to lots of meetings that Rickover didn't attend. That everybody would say, you can't do that. Rickover would never let you do that. Or
Admiral Rickover, who was the nuclear
he was the guy.
Navy.
He was the guy that ultimately became a 4-star admiral, but building a nuclear navy and the world's first commercial atomic power station.
And you worked with him.
And I worked with him
in your former life as a nuclear engineer.
Yeah, it's not my former life, really. The psychic is more my former because I'm not spending much time on it, but it's still of interest to me. But and he says, well, what can I do about that? And I said, well, you can't do anything except, if this guy is a good guy, and he seems to be, and he gets people, paying attention to him and so forth, it'll happen. You can't do much to stop it. But we had a lot of things like that I ended up getting in on, and then I ended up...
And did that guy become a parapsychology researcher that made a name for himself in the field?
Yeah.
What's his name?
Ramakrishna Rao. He was an Indian, R-A-O. And he was a good guy. He was from conventional psychology and was one of the new people that was keeping good experimental procedures and that kind of thing, And when Ryan tried to get his work published, and then they tried to become an affiliate organization, the Parapsychological Association tried to become an affiliate organization to the AAAS, which is the mainstream science, there was a big rhubarb about, this is not science, this is witchcraft and all that sort of thing. And a person finally that turned the tables on it in 1957 was Margaret Mead, who was head of the Parapsychological Association, head of the AAAS, the American Association of Advancement of Science at the time. And she said, look, science is not a description of a bunch of sandboxes we can play in. It's whether or not the phenomena are proper. And if they are carrying out good scientific work, then they're scientists, and they belong with us. Mm-hmm. And she says that we have was quite a large number of fellows of the AAAS, the top rank, and obviously what they're doing is good. And they had a survey made of the American Statistical Association, whatever it was called in those days, and they came up with a real clear answer that says that whatever faults these guys may have, the data handling is not among them. You can't challenge it on the way they handle data. They handle data completely properly, and which is a good vindication. So we came in, and then of course we put it to all kinds of tests, and we had a lot of fun with that. I was going to one of their annual conventions, and if you go to one of their conventions, it's like most scientific organizations. You'll find a whole exhibit area, and they have guys that sell all kinds of instruments and textbooks and all that kind of thing. And I said, what do you have to do to rent a booth here? You have to pay $150. And anything else? No, not really. I mean, it's got to be. It can't be obscene illegal or whatever the third thing is, libelous. But other than that, it's no problem. And I said, what if it's a tax-exempt organization? You know, you get a rate, half the price, or down to $75. So I said, great. I called a woman in New York who was head of the Parapsychology Foundation, and she herself was psychic, and her mother was particularly psychic, and she had some money. And I told her what I wanted to do, and I said, can I get $75 from you? And she said, sure. So we rented a booth, and we laid out, some of the various kinds of gadgets that people that use random number generators, and we let people play with this, and the textbooks that were out there and all that kind of stuff. And the organization was a little annoyed when they found out what had happened to them, but it was completely legit.
So what year was that?
Oh, gosh, 78 or something like that.
So now in Princeton, they've been doing a lot of the random number generating, and what they've found is that people can influence machines. Tell me, how do you explain that? How do you develop a theory? To me, it doesn't seem surprising that I can read your mind. I mean, I've been reading people's minds all my life. I walked into graduate school one day. I looked at a woman I'd never met before, and I said, your birthday is whatever date. And everybody, there were 5 people. Oh, my God, can you do that? So I guess if you have experiences, then you get familiar with the phenomenon. But I think you could develop a theory pretty easily about but a theory about how human beings can influence machines, to me, that feels like much more of a stretch.
Well, I think there are a lot of data that show that people are connected in various ways. The old classic story of 2 women and roommates in a college, and they find their menstrual cycles get synchronous.
Yes.
There are all kinds of things like that. And what does that sound like? Well, that sounds like the same kind of entrainment that you get in quantum mechanics. That even though it's instantaneous and all that kind of thing. And not only that, but this thing was run by Robert John, Jahn, who was Dean of Engineering at the time. So it was on pretty hard ground, And they set up a whole bunch of different kinds of tests and got pretty good data. And then you say theory. But John and Brenda Dunn, who was the lab director and had her degrees in experimental psychology, which of course this really is. Right. So they did, working from quantum mechanics, set up a whole a book called Dimensions of Reality, if I remember right, something like that. And it was published by Knopf, which is a leading scientific publisher. And Bob tells me that nobody bought it, but I don't think that's true. But the interesting thing was that the physicists, the results are very small effects. And I talked to Bob John one day, and I said, look, there are these kids.
Small but statistically significant.
Yes. But very small effect, and the only reason it was statistically significant was because there were huge numbers of points. And so the more data you have, the smaller the detectably significant is. And there are things in quantum mechanics, that are just very, very tiny. And so they had the book, they had the theory, they had the data, and they shut down the lab last year. And but that didn't mean that they were getting out of the field. What it meant was that they were tired of getting harassed by everybody that thought they were degrading the university by declaring it witchcraft. Eugene Wigner, the Nobel laureate physicist, told me that the professors were continually hiking into the president's office at the university and saying, this guy is wrecking the reputation of a good university. And John said, I'm not using a nickel's worth of university money. I'm getting my own money, and I've got tenure, and this is why I got tenure, and I have an international reputation. This is what I'm doing, and I'm not gonna be intimidated.
So where is he now?
Still at Princeton. He's retired, actually.
Uh-huh.
But
the lab is, you said it shut down.
That particular lab is shut down, but they've gone and opened an international program that they're working with people. And one of the things that they're doing, you were asking, well, what's happening today? There's a guy named Dean Radin, R-A-D-I-N, who used to work at Princeton with John briefly, and then went up and set some of his own stuff up. And he was very interested in this effect on the computers. And one of his ideas was, he set up a bunch of random number generators, these things that just spin out ones and zeros, and you get it so that it's that there are an equal number of ones and zeros. This is pretty hard to do, actually, reliably and completely, and have it free from the voltage oscillations or anything like that. But that was their big contribution. They made some really solid things. And then what he did was, watch what happens at an international soccer match where 1 billion people all over the world are watching, and wow, they're going to go, and everybody's all excited. And sure enough, all these computers around the world flicker up and down, Wow. And he's taken that out several steps of very interesting things. Another thing they did was remote viewing, and they didn't invent this, but they carried up to a pretty high degree of precision. And what you do there is...
That was originally Russell Tarrant's work.
Yeah, a whole bunch of guys did this. And what they did was they would pick 100 different sites around where they were working, within an hour or so of where they were working. It'd be a site in the woods, there'd be a site in a factory, there'd be a site in a street corner. And these were, and they designated what these were, and they had these in a 100 sheets of paper with a picture, and they'd shuffle these things up, and they'd reach in, blindly pull one out, and tell the guy to go here. And then when he got there, describe what you see, and they were get surprisingly close results to the guy in the lab sitting there trying to visualize whatever comes to his mind. And then they wanted to get this, they said, these things that are not quantitative are very hard to determine what's the statistical significance. I mean, you could have one of the shots was in the woods, for instance, but it was in an A-frame cabin, and the guy saw a lot of the stuff of these beams and structures and that kind of stuff, and there are also trees and stuff, and so, what's significant? So they set it up in a numerical thing, and put a lot of work into getting, what percentage of the time would you expect to see trees? Would you expect to see beams? Would you expect to see glass? Would you, all these things, and set that up. And then they had the machine judging of the thing on what's the probability of seeing this combination. So the whole thing got away from the descriptive. And then what they did, they'd been doing the descriptive for years. And then they went back and checked the former scenes and what the answers came out, and how did they compare with the ones that were done completely by machine. And they found there was surprisingly good correlation.
So I'm going to tell you about an experiment I did in graduate school with Gertrude Smigel. So I took dreams of various people that I knew, and one of them was me. And I sealed it in tinfoil because that was supposed to block any visual perception. And then I had two groups of people that were known to be psychic. Alan Vaughn was one of them. I don't know if you remember him.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
And then my buddies, my graduate school friends. And so they were each given an envelope, and they were supposed to meditate or do whatever they wanted to do, sit on it, on these tinfoil sealed dreams. And then write something about either the dream or the person who had the dream. So Alan Vaughn's wife also was there. So there were 3 psychics, and then there were 3 presumably non-psychics. So I think Alan got my dream. And the dream was that he was describing a house. And you walked into the house, and there was a chandelier that had flame-shaped bulbs on it, and there was a piano under it. And off in that corner was a wooden box with pine cones, and various other great detail description of this home. The inside, the interior, and specifically the living room. And I when I read that, I knew that he had had my dream, and I didn't know what he was describing. The next day, I flew to New Orleans to my home, and I walked into my house, my parents' house, the house that I'd grown up in. And my mother, I hadn't been there in a few months, my mother had redecorated the living room.
Oh.
And there was the chandelier that Alan had seen, and there was the box, the wood box with the pine cones, every other detail that he had seen.
But that was precognitive.
It was precognitive. I hadn't seen it. Or it was remote viewing.
Well, no, but it was in the future.
Yeah. Well, no, he could. It existed while he was meditating on the dream. That space existed. I just had never seen it. So it could have been remote viewing.
Well, I'll go on from there, because that leads right into the point that that they tried to do this in the past. That is, they tried to have the guy go to the site, record all of his stuff, and then a week later or a month later, they'd ask the guy to try to dredge it up. And that worked just as fine as in the past. So then somebody said, how about let's try it precognitively, because then nobody can argue about data leakage, And of course, they'd also done it independent of distance. They did it from China, they did it from Czechoslovakia.
And it all didn't matter. The distance didn't matter, and the time did.
That's right.
The past, present, future, there was no difference.
That's right. And so
I've heard that the military actually was doing research into remote viewing and wanting to use it, and that Russia actually had a much more highly developed program for remote viewing.
Right.
In terms of their military.
Yeah, and they finally one of the networks did a program on this, and Jessica Utz, who was a well-known statistician, had gone through the whole analysis of the data and everything, and they had her and I guess Hal Puthoff was the central guy, and they had what's that guy's name? The skeptic, one of the guys from the PsyCop organization, the so-called skeptics, and they had it on major network. I've forgotten which one of the networks it was, but I could ask Jessica. But they finally came up with a conclusion. Ray Hyman is the guy I was trying to remember. Ray Hyman, H-Y-M-A-N. They finally came up with a conclusion that something was happening, but and Hyman's final position was, or maybe what's revealing is that we don't know as much about statistics as we thought we did. It's some fluke of statistics, But that whole thing of trying different phenomena now outside the laboratory to check some of these things is the direction that Hyman is going, Radin is going. One of the things he did was very interesting. He was living in Las Vegas for a while, and he made contact with a guy that's running one of the casinos, and they keep a continuous videotape of everything that goes on, in order to check that there's anybody who's doing anything tricky or fool or roulette wheel or whatever, And so you have this continuous 24/7 surveying of the scene. And one of the questions they did before that was, is there any connection with the phase of the moon? And sure enough, there is. It's small, but there is a small effect there. But what they were looking for, there's been a lot of studies of what they call nonverbal communication. People's body language and all kinds of stuff like that. And so they wanted to see, what happens when the blonde from Chicago comes in and this guy's winning suddenly drop off, anybody doing stuff. And in the non-communication studies that they've done, they found that things that happen, that the people in a room are really in a dance all the time. And the communication it has not only instantaneity of connection, but sometimes even a little bit of the event preceding the cause. I mean, they'd have a thing where the gal in the corner would cross her legs and the guy back here would turn his head, and yet it turns out that he actually started to turn his head before she crossed her knees. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff. So he was getting a lot of stuff from the casino of what happens,
Right.
between people, and is there any correlation, time correlation? In that sense, almost like what Cleve Baxter was doing.
I want to tell you about a precognitive dream I had. You now know I'm from New Orleans, because I mentioned I had flown down there after that experiment. I dreamt about New Orleans being flooded. And I dreamt that it looked exactly like it looked post-Katrina. The problem was that I dreamt it 30 years ago. So, as we said, time kind of doesn't exist on this level.
Well, and that's why it's really good when you can put numbers on things.
Yeah.
Because it's awfully hard to tell,
Yeah.
Over 30 years, what is your probability of having a dream like that?
Yeah.
And that
And
kind of
the
stuff.
experiment that I ran, where Alan Vaughn got my mother's living room, by the way, was not statistically significant because nobody knew that living room had anything to do
Yeah.
with me, including me.
Sure.
But I wasn't a judge anyway.
Yeah.
I also want to tell you that I used to do a lot of card tricks when I was young. And there's one card trick where you lay it out 3 columns and then you pick it up and you lay it out again. And it's a mathematical formula. And so the third time that you lay it out, the designated card that the person has picked out in their mind that you don't know is always in the 4th position, first
Right.
row, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I would pick up the cards the first time I would finish the card trick. I'd lay them out 3 times, but I always knew the card, from the beginning.
Yeah.
So, Ted, this has been wonderful. Thank you for helping me to be updated on parapsychology. It's been a long time since I've been thinking about this.
Well, me too, actually.
Yeah, well, we should do this again and talk more about parapsychology.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting story, and I don't know where you put this, but Howard Zimmerman, who was executive director of the ASPR, the Association for Psychical Research, was a young guy, as everybody was in those days, and he was in a class with Richard Alpert, later to become Baba Ram Dass.